All right, so we're diving deep today, folks, into the world of Coca-Cola. And we've got a whole stack of reports and analyses, even some like insider gossip, to really get a good picture of how this iconic company is doing financially.
And it really is fascinating. I mean, Coca-Cola's story, it's not just about balance sheets and numbers. It's about branding, global reach. It's about adapting to a market that, frankly, seems to change every other day.
Right, exactly. And you can't talk about Coca-Cola without mentioning their marketing genius, you know what I mean? Like the Polar Bears, those heartwarming holiday commercials that we all know and love.
Oh, for sure.
Those personalized share a Coke bottles. They've really figured out how to make you feel something.
Absolutely. They've consistently tapped into those universal emotions. Happiness, joy, togetherness. They've made their product more than just a drink. It's a symbol. It's a symbol of good times and shared experiences.
Yeah. And it's amazing how they've managed to keep that consistent brand image, but still they tailor their message, to different cultures, different regions around the world. It's like they're speaking this universal language of happiness, but with a local dialect. Think about it. Have you ever noticed how Coke's packaging or even the flavors change when you travel?
It's a brilliant strategy. By adapting to those local preferences, they ensure that their brand feels familiar but also relevant all over the world, which is a huge factor in their global domination. Because don't forget, they're in over 200 countries.
Over 200 countries. Speaking of global domination, this is where things get I think this is where things get interesting. Coca-Cola is diving headfirst into, wait for it, alcoholic beverages, Topo Chico, hard seltzer, anyone. Can you imagine ordering a Jack and Coke where, both come from the same company?
It might seem, surprising at first, but it makes perfect sense when you consider how consumer preferences, are changing. I mean, the hard seltzer market has exploded in recent years, and Coca-Cola, they're positioning themselves to capitalize on that trend.
Savvy business strategists.
Always.
Always. And let's not forget about their acquisition of Costa coffee. They're diversifying their portfolio. Get a piece of that growing coffee market. Appeal to a wider range of consumers. But what about their bread and butter?
Right.
Those sugary, fizzy drinks. How's that playing out in a world where, everybody's increasingly concerned about health and sustainability?
Well, that's a really great question. And to answer that, I think we need to look at their recent stock performance because things have been, well, I guess, a bit flat. They hit an all-time high of $72.52 a share back in September 2024. But then it took a bit of a tumble, dropping about 11.8%. And to understand why, we need to unpack what unit case volume actually means. It's essentially a measure of how much product they're actually selling.
So are you saying that people just aren't buying as much Coke as they used to? Did everyone suddenly switch to, kale smoothies?
Well, not quite that simple. Their unit case volume did decline by 1% in the third quarter of 2024, which was their first decline since the fourth quarter of 2022. And a poor July seems to be the main culprit.
Really?
Yeah, coupled with some unfavorable currency fluctuations, that impacted their international revenues. Plus, the beverage market, I mean, let's face it, it's getting increasingly competitive.
Right.
And all those marketing campaigns, all those product launches, those cost money.
Even a giant like Coca-Cola isn't immune to market forces, huh? But they're not just sitting back, watching things fizz out. They've got some interesting initiatives brewing, focusing on product diversification to match evolving consumer preferences.
Exactly. We're talking low sugar options, functional beverages. They're even experimenting with 100% paper bottles to address growing sustainability concerns.
Paper bottles.
Yeah.
Now that's an interesting idea, especially considering their reputation as a major plastic polluter.
It's a big issue for them.
It is a big issue for them.
Absolutely. Coca-Cola consistently ranks as one of the top global plastic polluters. They're facing a lot of pressure to clean up their act, so they've implemented some initiatives using recycled materials, water replenishment programs, things like that.
But are those efforts really enough? What more can Coca-Cola do to minimize its environmental footprint? These are some of the questions we'll be tackling as we continue our deep dive. Stick with us. We're just getting started.
So we were talking about, those sustainability efforts, right? And whether Coca-Cola is really doing enough to combat that reputation as a top global plastic polluter.
Yeah, it's tricky, right? Because, they are making efforts, but the scale of the problem is it's massive. We're talking about billions of plastic bottles ending up in landfills and oceans every year. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a complicated issue. No easy solutions. I mean, Coca-Cola has committed to using at least 50% recycled material in its bottles and cans by 2030.
Okay.
And they've set a target to collect and recycle a bottle or can for each one they sell by that same year.
Those sound like positive steps, right?
Yeah, but are those goals like ambitious enough? And what about, you mentioned those paper bottles they're developing. Are those actually like a realistic solution?
The paper bottle project, I mean, it's a fascinating innovation, but it's still, early stages. There are technical hurdles to overcome, and the cost of production is a major factor.
Yeah, imagine scaling up production to meet the demands of a company as big as Coca-Cola. I mean, that would be a huge undertaking. And not to mention, like, will people actually, buy it? Will they actually switch to a paper bottle?
Exactly. Consumer acceptance. I mean, that's the big question mark, right? Will people embrace paper bottles? Or will they just stick with what they know? Remember New Coke?
Ooh.
That was a bold move.
Yes.
Even if it didn't quite work out as planned.
Oh, yeah, New Coke. Good reminder that even iconic brands can, stumble. But it also shows that that they're willing to take risks and learn from their mistakes.
Exactly.
Speaking of risks, I mean, Coca-Cola's venture into alcoholic beverages, that's a gamble, isn't it? They're stepping into a crowded market with a lot of established players.
It is a gamble. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But I think we should maybe zoom out for a second and look at Coca-Cola's like overall performance, their outlook for the future. What's the verdict? Are they on track to maintain that market dominance,
Yeah.
or are they heading for a sugar crash?
That's the $1 million question.
It is the $1 million question. The reality is, it's a mixed bag. They're facing headwinds, that's for sure. I mean, the recent stock decline is a pretty clear sign of that. Yeah, investors are definitely a bit nervous, I think, about their future prospects.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. But let's not forget about Coca-Cola's strengths, right? We've got the iconic brand, the global reach. I mean, that massive distribution network. Those are powerful assets, and they give them a significant edge over the competition.
Yeah,
for sure.
And they're not just sitting back, hoping for the best. They're actively investing in new products, exploring new markets. They're using digital technology to connect with consumers in new and innovative ways.
Right. Their Create Real Magic digital marketing campaign is a good example of that. It's all about harnessing, the power of social media technology to engage consumers on a much deeper level.
Right. Absolutely. It seems like they're really, trying to stay ahead of the curve here. They recognize that the way, people consume media and interact with brands is changing rapidly.
It is. It's evolving every day. And they're not afraid to experiment, to try new things, which is crucial for any company that wants to stay relevant in today's fast-paced world.
It makes you wonder what Coca-Cola will look like in 10 or 20 years. Will they still be the beverage giant that we know today, or will they have, transformed into something completely different?
It's an intriguing question. One thing is certain. They need to continue adapting, innovating, and addressing those sustainability concerns if they want to thrive in the long term.
Yeah.
For sure.
Now, before we move on, you might be wondering, like, why should I care about Coca-Cola's financial ups and downs? Well, for starters, I think it's a fascinating case study in how a global brand navigates the complexities of the modern marketplace.
It's a great point. It's a reminder that even the most successful companies face challenges, and that adapting to change is absolutely crucial for survival.
Yeah. And, thinking about it, it might even make you think twice about, reaching for that next Coke, knowing what you now know about their environmental impact, their marketing strategies, their financial performance. Do you view this iconic beverage in a different light?
It's definitely something to consider. And speaking of things to consider, there's one piece of the Coca-Cola puzzle that we haven't discussed yet, and that's their unique business model.
Oh, you mean that franchise model that everyone's always talking about?
Exactly. Yeah.
I've always wondered how that actually works.
Well, so at its core, Coca-Cola produces the concentrates and the syrups, for their beverages, which are then sold to a vast network of bottling partners all over the world.
So Coca-Cola isn't actually like bottling and distributing most of its products.
Right.
That's really interesting.
You got it. This model allows them to focus on what they do best, which is, product development, marketing, brand management, and they leave the more capital intensive, bottling and distribution to their partners.
That's a pretty clever strategy. I mean, they get to maintain control over their brand and their recipes, but they're leveraging the local expertise and the infrastructure of their bottling partners.
Precisely. And it's a major reason behind their global success. This decentralized model allows them to adapt very quickly to local market conditions and consumer preferences.
But I imagine like managing relationships with so many, different bottling partners all over the globe, that must be incredibly complex.
It is complex. It definitely requires, a high level of coordination, communication. But Coca-Cola has been refining this model for decades, and it's proven to be, remarkably resilient.
So how does this franchise model impact, their bottom line?
Well, for one thing, it's a high margin business. They generate substantial revenue from selling those concentrates and syrups without having to, shoulder the costs of bottling and distribution.
It sounds like a win-win for Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
They get to focus on, what they do best, and their partners handle the heavy lifting.
In a nutshell, yes. But, there are always risks involved. For instance, if a bottling partner has financial troubles or operational issues, that can, directly impact Coca-Cola sales in that region.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that even with a well-oiled business model, there are always those external factors that can throw a wrench in the works.
Absolutely. And as we've been discussing, Coca-Cola is facing challenges on multiple fronts. We've got changing consumer preferences, increased competition, and those persistent sustainability concerns.
Yeah, it's a lot to manage, but we're about to wrap up our deep dive. So let's move on to the final part, where we'll distill the key takeaways from everything that we've learned about Coca-Cola today. Welcome back to the deep dive. So we've been talking about Coca-Cola, their marketing, their global reach, new markets like those alcoholic beverages, coffee, and of course those those sustainability challenges that they're facing. But I think now, let's kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about what we can, what can we learn from Coca-Cola's journey? What are the takeaways here?
Yeah, there are I think some really important lessons here. First of all, building a strong brand, connecting with consumers on an emotional level, that is absolutely crucial. And Coca-Cola has, I think, that they've really nailed this. And it's a major reason for their enduring success.
Yeah. I mean, those polar bears and those Share a Coke bottles, they pull at the heartstrings, right?
Exactly. They do. The second takeaway, I think, is the power of innovation, right? I mean, Coca-Cola, they're always evolving. They're experimenting with new products, new flavors. They're adapting to changing tastes. They're a prime example of how a company needs to stay agile in a market that's constantly changing.
Yeah. It's true. I mean, they're not afraid to try new things, even if it means making some mistakes along the way. I mean, New Coke, it might not have worked out, but it showed that they were willing to take a risk. To take a risk,
absolutely. And finally, and I think, we can't forget this one, the importance of addressing those sustainability concerns. And while Coca-Cola is making progress, they still have a long way to go. And I think this really highlights the responsibility that every company has, to operate in a sustainable and ethical manner, no matter how big or how successful they are.
Well said. So knowing what we now know about Coca-Cola, their financial standing, their impact on the world, will you reach for a Coke differently next time? It's something to think about.
Definitely food for thought. It's been fascinating, exploring the ins and outs of this iconic brand, and I think it really highlights how important it is to stay informed, to ask questions, to be mindful of the choices that we make as consumers.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Until next time, folks, keep those deep dive requests coming.